tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We've had fans out here since 5:30 a.m.
Well, the lineups are clear. There's no shortage of popularity as concerts, shows, and games get back to normal.
I would like to apologize to people in Ottawa.
Broke and homeless. A BC man who protested in the Freedom Convoy to Ottawa says he regrets it. And
everybody's looking to get into them at the same time.
The demand for swimming lessons across the province and why there may be no fix.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. From packed arenas to at-capacity theaters and concert halls, live entertainment is here and thriving. While some are still wary of health risks, as Johanna Hamilton reports, many others are pumped to be filling the seats after 2 years of COVID closures.
Big international musicians are once again taking stages in Vancouver.
Billie Eilish is here tonight. We have Dua Lipa coming up on April the 1st. We go on sale with Machine Gun Kelly tomorrow, which is very exciting. Dave Chappelle is coming to Vancouver.
Billie Eilish fans camped out outside Rogers Arena ahead of the show.
It's so exciting for the fans to have a full building. The energy in the building has been fantastic with hockey. We expect that with concerts.
An experience many people have been longing for.
Like all the concerts were online. It's just not the same. Being in a concert with people that have the same passion as you and like love the same music as you is just so much more different.
It's a change of scenery for those taking in a concert or a live arts performance at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre.
We need to get out the house. We need something different, little change.
And a sigh of relief for those who work in the local arts and music industries.
Clubs are busy, the live shows are very busy, all of our festivals are selling well.
Some of those venues had to shut their doors for good during the pandemic, costing more than 500 jobs.
And so we saw about a year ago venues starting to fall away, and it's really a loss for culture whenever that happens.
Sabine says the return to full capacity shows and optional mask wearing means halls and theaters can start trying to rebuild.
In the meantime, you're seeing that it's really hard to get dates almost anywhere, which means the calendars are full, which means the demand is there and that the artists are coming. Because again, you don't necessarily think about that. You don't think about the people that do lighting and sound and the dancers and the door person and all of this whole ecosystem that's really been struggling for the last 2 years.
And with more people heading to live performances, restaurants are ready to cash in.
Well, anything that brings out people, like sunshine, concerts, hockey games, all those kinds of things. Invariably, a person is going to stop at a coffee shop, go for a little lunch, go for a snack, maybe stay downtown and have a cocktail. This is all the business that we haven't had for the last couple of years.
Both concert goers and workers are keen to make up for lost time. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Vancouver Fraser Port Authority says despite the pandemic, global supply chain problems and extreme weather, cargo volumes have gone up by 1%. 146 million metric tons of cargo went through the port last year thanks to record container and foreign bulk volumes. Despite the high level of trade, Canada's largest port warns that serious supply chain problems will occur in a few years because West Coast container terminals are expected to run out of capacity by the end of the decade.
And really, if you look at where that growth came from, we saw this yet another record year in container volumes with 6% growth in containers. A lot of that's, of course, because all of us across the country were buying things in stores because I guess we weren't able to travel. And so we weren't spending quite so much money on travel. And we were spending money on goods that were imported through the port in Vancouver.
Amid the increase in container trade, there was an elevated number of empty containers. This put pressure on Canadian exporters because the containers were rushed back to Asia to accommodate strong consumer demand in North America. A man currently living in Hope who joined the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa last month says he regrets his decision. He's now homeless and out $13,000.
I need something to break the monotony of the life, to break this, the circle of loneliness, or some other people add other stuff. But the thing is like, I regret every day going. Like, I have nothing left.
Martin Joseph Engelhardt is speaking from hope inside the SUV he now calls home. He admits he never had a true stance on vaccine mandates, but he was drawn to the Convoy after COVID-19 restrictions prevented him from seeing a dying friend in Montreal. He closed his business and left his home in Fort McKee, Alberta. When the dust settled from the protests, his landlord kicked him out over his point of view concerning the protest.
Well, I'm not doing anything, and like, maybe I can help. Maybe I can do something else with my time than sit at home and stay behind my screen all the time. And I thought that was a cause, that was bigger than me. I started delivering fuel and picking up laundry and delivery for a restaurant and everything for the trucker.
Bank statements provided to CBC show he spent thousands of dollars, his life savings, on that fuel and food for the truckers. He was later arrested for giving them gas and ordered to leave Ottawa upon his release. He expected the organizers to reimburse him, but he has not seen a cent back, despite the Convoy raising millions through crowdfunding. Now his bank account is frozen, and he has this to say to the city the Convoy disrupted.
I would like to apologize to people in Ottawa. I'm sorry you guys had to take it on, and I feel so bad. All I wanted was to help people. I need to concentrate to try to put myself back together.
A $300 million class action lawsuit against the Convoy has been launched by residents and businesses of downtown Ottawa. Well, demand for swim programs across the province is sky high. A problem before the pandemic, only made worse now. And as Karen Larson tells us, community pools are finding they just can't keep up.
Every parent knows swimming lessons are important to teach children basic water safety and survival skills. But in most BC cities, getting into lessons at the local pool is no easy feat. 2 years of swimming pool shutdowns and restrictions from the COVID-19 pandemic means there is pent-up demand and not nearly enough supply.
There has been a lack of access to pools, so I think everybody's looking to get into them at the same time. And that's definitely creating a backlog and a shortage of swim lessons.
In Prince George, where a new community pool is set to open later this year, the wait list for lessons is 700 names long. Vancouver, Kamloops, and Kelowna also report long wait lists. While in Burnaby, the pressure is greatest on the preschool Learn to Swim programs, where the instructor-to-student ratio is as low as 1 to 3.
The message is just to be patient and to be kind to. We know we're trying to increase our demand or supply to actually meet the needs of everybody.
Basic water safety knowledge is especially important in BC with our abundance of lakes, rivers, and ocean. But besides that pandemic backlog, there's a second factor fueling the swimming lesson shortage: not enough lifeguards.
There certainly is a shortage. We've been hiring constantly since the fall of last year. And there's been both the reluctance amongst the public as well as staff to return to the same crowded conditions in swimming pools.
Pool programmers say they are doing everything to help solve the bottleneck, but think it will likely take a couple of years for things to return to normal. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
After a slight increase in COVID hospitalizations yesterday, BC is reporting another drop. 3 fewer patients are in hospital. At least 3 more people are in critical care, though. In the past 24 hours, 6 more people have died from COVID-19. The Coquihalla Highway is expected to reopen to full capacity by the end of this year. Repair work is planned over the summer along 4 sections of the highway that were heavily damaged by November's flooding and storms. The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure has started the process to select contractors to design and complete the repairs at 3 of the 7 damaged bridges. The ministry says the work will return the highway to 4 lanes along a section between its summit and Merritt. An oyster recall has been expanded by Health Canada with concerns about possible norovirus contamination. Chef Creek oysters by Stellar Bay Shellfish are sold in BC, but also distributed in other provinces. The specific ones, part of this recall, were harvested on March 7th in Deep Bay off the coast of Vancouver Island. The recall comes after an investigation into people reporting getting sick after eating the oysters. It's not clear how many people have been hit with the virus, but norovirus seems to be going around at the moment. Earlier this week, Health Canada also recalled 3 other varieties of oysters. Amy Bell joins us now with the forecast. Johanna is off this week, and you came just in time, Amy, with the good news.
A couple of sunny days, not so bad. Yeah, today was gorgeous. The clouds we were expecting did roll in, but a little bit later than we thought, and also they were a little bit higher and lighter. So we still saw quite a lot of brightness and still some breaks of blue sky, and it's a pleasant evening out there, so still plenty to enjoy. Temperature-wise, it was another warm one. So we're still at 8 at the airport, 15 in Pitt Meadows, though, and looking at 14 out in Abbotsford. So definitely still dealing with that mild temperature system, and we will continue to see that, though. We'll see those overnights a little bit chillier. Taking a look, though, for the next 24 hours, we have the system arriving even closer, so that is going to unfortunately bring some rain and showers to areas of the north coast and the northern half of Vancouver Island. We'll see that rain holding off around us, though, until late tomorrow, early Saturday morning. Saturday, unfortunately, will be a very wet one, but 12 degrees, so not too bad. Saturday, we have a chance of showers. I think late in the day, we could even see a few little breaks, and then Saturday is the wet one, and then Sunday, we'll see things easing off, and we could see some sunshine late in the day. Looking further ahead to next week, of course, as spring break ends, we do have some sunshine on store for Monday, but then we get back into some wet weather. So perfectly normal for March. Spring in Vancouver means you never know what you're going to get each day.
Yeah, I've been hearing people say Marchuary today.
I think so.
Thanks, Amy.
Weather update brought to you by Alegria by Cirque du Soleil. Opens March 25th at Concord Pacific Place.
Well, it's a big night for soccer in this country. Canada's men's national team could be going to the World Cup if they can pull off a win tonight against Costa Rica. It would be the first appearance at the tournament in decades, and that has players dreaming and fans buzzing. Dan Bird is live tonight with people gathered to watch the match in downtown Vancouver. A long wait for Canada's men's team, Dan.
Well, it's only been almost 40 years, Anita. Who's counting? We know Canada's women's team have had amazing success on the world stage. But as you said, it was 1986 when our men's team last qualified for the World Cup. They hope to change that with a win in Costa Rica tonight. Keep in mind, they are the visitors, and Costa Rica is a challenging team to play with on their home turf. But Canada's run has been amazing. They are undefeated in 17 qualifying games, and that includes big wins against the U.S., Panama, Mexico, as well as Costa Rica, once already fueled by our stars like the great Alphonso Davies. Keep this in mind, when John Herdman took over as coach of this team in 2018, FIFA ranked them 94th in the world. Today, they're 33rd. Now, one more win tonight, and Canada punches its ticket to Qatar in 2022 in November. Now, kickoff is just after 7 o'clock tonight. We're here at Red Card downtown. Talked to the manager who says dozens of people, at least probably up to 60, have booked seats to watch the game here tonight. Lots of excitement across this country as people have been waiting a long time. There is a scenario where Canada can still qualify for the World Cup if they don't win outright tonight. But that depends on other teams. So, as Coach Herdman said today, let's get it done. Anita.
Let's get it done, Dan. Dan Burrett live tonight in downtown Vancouver. Thank you. Well, 2 preteens in BC's South Cariboo region are trying to do their part to help people in Ukraine. While their friends are enjoying spring break, the 10 and 11-year-olds partnered up to host a local peace walk and fundraiser this coming Sunday in 100 Mile House.
We wanted to do something for Ukraine, obviously, and we were wondering how. So when we were walking around the marsh one time, we had the idea of doing a walk for Ukraine donation thing.
I'm also Ukrainian, and I feel so bad. People in Ukraine have to walk miles to get to Poland.
Yeah, our original goal was 1,000, but
And
we've
so-
already passed it before it even started.
We already made $1,070.
Nice work, boys. That's why they've now increased the fundraising goal to $2,000. If you happen to be in the 100 Mile House region on Sunday, their event starts at noon, and they'll be starting their march at the South Caribou Visitor Centre. Well, our own Justin McElroy was in Lillooet, and he's been moving around the province quite a bit on this trek that he's been on, trying to find BC's small town, best small town. Let's turn now to that search. Voting today is all about the interior, known for its natural beauty and agricultural bounty. You can cast your ballot each day until 10 p.m. Here are the towns leading right now.
We've got the Kootenays, the Okanagan, the Boundary and Columbia regions, but only 8 communities can make it to the next round. And in the Trans-Canada Clash of Mountain Towns, it is Golden taking the silver, down big to their rivals to the west in Revelstoke. Further south, there is a wine country battle between Osoyoos and Oliver, but it is the bigger community of Osoyoos with the sizable lead at the moment. But it's not just size that matters. Nakusp has less than 2,000 people, but it defeated Trail in the first round, and look at this, is once again defeating a larger Kootenay centre, currently leading against Castlegar. As for Greenwood, the self-proclaimed smallest city in Canada, it may have a beautiful main street, but it ended up being no match for Naramata. This week, voting in a Southwest matchup came down to a single ballot, a reminder that every vote counts in the search for BC's best small town.
NATO leaders gather in Brussels, seeking to cripple the Kremlin as they consider their next steps. Russia's assault of Ukraine has now lasted 1 month. More from Europe coming up. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Okay, here's one way to celebrate your 50th birthday. Go on a 50-kilometer run once a week for 50 weeks. That's how one ultra-marathon runner from Chelsea, Quebec marked his half-century birthday milestone. Take a look.
He's at the halfway mark. That man in the orange fox onesie is turning 50 today, and he's getting closer to the finish line on his final 50K run.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Tell me, what have you got on?
This is my fox costume that I actually bought a couple years back for a Halloween at school where I teach.
The eye-catching apparel has another significance. The fox represents the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Carriere is running to raise funds for those with Parkinson's disease.
My mom had Parkinson's disease and she died a little over 7 years ago. So the cause and the foundation have gotten very, very close to my heart, my siblings, and so this has been a natural fit to do something physically challenging, mentally challenging, but also in honor of those who fight Parkinson's disease every day.
Carriere is an elementary school phys ed teacher, an ultra-marathon runner. 1 day a week for 50 weeks, he's taken off for a 50K run, exploring the Chelsea trails that wind along the Gatineau River, or jogging through the trails of Gatineau Park. Now he's making a pit stop at his home in Chelsea to fuel up before the final leg. And what are the secret ingredients packed in that sandwich?
Avocado, mayonnaise, and salt. I really started trail running in 2015, in the fall of 2015. And with time, just the challenges kept getting longer or more difficult in terms of terrain, in terms of climbing and descending. And yeah, I certainly never thought I would get to something like this, but it's been a great journey so far. Not done yet.
Still miles to go before he rests, as Carrier wraps up his unique birthday present to himself and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Sandra Abma, CBC News, Chelsea.
Ukraine is accusing the Kremlin of forcibly taking hundreds of thousands of civilians from shattered Ukrainian cities to Russia. Ukrainian officials claim more than 400,000 people have been taken against their will. Moscow has given numbers for people they say have been relocated. According to the Kremlin, those people wanted to go to Russia. The allegations come as leaders from both NATO and the G7 countries gather to work out a response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is pledging ongoing support for NATO's efforts, while the head of the alliance is now offering some new warnings. Ellen Morrow has the latest from Brussels.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called Russia's invasion of Ukraine the greatest security challenge facing the military alliance in a generation. And so today, NATO announced a major bolstering of troop presence in Eastern Europe. 4 new battle groups being deployed to 4 Eastern European countries, along with more combat ships in the seas and more jets in NATO airspace. Stoltenberg says Russia's aggression means NATO needs to increase its deterrence and defense.
President Putin's invasion of Ukraine has changed our security environment for the long term.
NATO leaders heard from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during their emergency meeting, who pleaded for offensive weapons like tanks and planes to be sent to his country as this war enters its 2nd month. In response to that plea, Stoltenberg said NATO will continue to provide Ukraine weapons to defend itself, but said the alliance can't risk triggering a wider war with Russia. Countries are looking for other ways to pressure Vladimir Putin. Canada, the U.S., and the U.K. all announcing more sanctions on hundreds of Russian individuals and entities.
Putin needs to know that there will be no erosion of our determination and that the catastrophic costs of our sanctions will only grow over time.
This was a day of extraordinary whirlwind diplomacy in Brussels, a G7 leaders meeting and a European Council meeting in addition to the NATO summit. Western leaders eager to show unity in the face of Russia's aggression. A specter hanging over all of those meetings is whether Russia will resort to launching a chemical weapons attack in Ukraine. We've heard that warning from U.S. President Joe Biden. Stoltenberg said NATO is providing Ukraine with protective equipment in the case of a nuclear, chemical, or biological attack by Russia. He is also urging Stoltenberg for NATO member countries to spend 2% of GDP on defense. Canada is currently falling short of that target. Stoltenberg says there's a new urgency to that spending and that peace cannot be taken for granted. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Brussels.
The war in Ukraine is now entering its 2nd month, and as the Russian invasion drags on, Ukraine's president is appealing for a global demonstration of support, while the country's military is announcing a significant strike against Russian forces.
A Russian landing ship went up in a spectacular ball of fire today, and 2 others seemed damaged as Ukrainian forces claimed triumph in a port near the besieged city of Mariupol. A glimmer of victory in a country where the struggle for survival grinds on. Life in Mariupol, bombed and blasted for more than 3 weeks by Russia, is a choice between long lines for humanitarian aid and tough treks to escape, if possible. A familiar story in shattered cities across Ukraine, several of them on Kyiv's doorstep, where Russia tries to besiege the capital, and refugees like Andrei lose family members in the flames, fleeing with only his guitar.
1 second and I see a yellow explosion, sound in ears. I see the broken car. My mother was, ще була жива тоді, коли горіла.
My mother was still alive while she was on fire.
The head of the International Red Cross was in Moscow to try to convince a reluctant Russia to allow more civilians out. It's not possible, he says.
If we don't have solid agreement and detailed agreement between the militaries on the ground.
Increasingly, that ground is affecting Ukraine's NATO neighbors. At a Polish airfield near the border, A steady stream of arms is flown in now, protected by batteries of Patriot missiles pointed toward Russia. Whatever success Ukraine's had, it's been thanks to this Western help. Its president now wants more global protests.
Come with Ukrainian symbols to support Ukraine, to support freedom, to support life. Come to your squares, your streets. Make yourselves visible and heard.
Meanwhile, the death count grows. Outside Kharkiv today, the funeral for a Holocaust survivor who didn't survive the invasion, one of well over 1,000 civilian deaths in a month of war. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
Earlier, we heard from a man living out of his car in Hope, speaking about his regrets over joining the Freedom Convoy. In Ottawa, meanwhile, police forces appeared before the House of Commons Public Safety and National Security Committee. And as Travis Dunraj explains, they weren't the only individuals on the hot seat over their actions during the 3-week occupation.
Sounds and sights Ottawa residents are happy to see gone. Today, two of the most prominent convoy organizers, Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, face new charges. They include mischief, intimidation, and resist or willfully obstruct a peace officer.
It's not an illegal protest.
After her arrest, Litch was denied but eventually granted bail. She was not permitted on social media. Today, her lawyers indicated they want to argue she should be allowed to log back on soon.
I'm being arrested by these officers right now.
Also in court, self-proclaimed convoy leader Pat King, who has been in custody since February 18th. He is already facing a list of charges, including mischief and counseling to obstruct justice. Today, that list got longer, 6 additional charges.
I call this meeting to order.
While the plight of organizers played out in court, police were in the hot seat on the Hill. The commissioner of the OPP and interim Ottawa police chief grilled at a sitting of the Public Safety and National Security Committee.
On what date did you feel that the protests had moved into an illegal occupation?
As the protest grew in scope and scale, and as we observed the activities of the members, it turned from what would have been a demonstration to an illegal occupation very early in the stage.
The leaders pushed on why protest ended in Windsor and Alberta without the use of the Emergencies Act.
If, in fact, laws and statutes were broken prior to the Emergencies Act being invoked.
From the time that people did not leave what could have been a lawful demonstration to ultimately our takedown, lawful activity was observed, documented, and prosecuted.
The commissioner of the OPP also admitted today on February 7th, a national security threat was identified. That's a full week before the Emergencies Act was invoked, raising more questions about why police didn't act sooner, answers that could take months for residents to get. Travis Dunraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prince William is speaking out on slavery during his Caribbean tour, but it's not the apology many wanted. He was in Jamaica, the latest country cutting ties with the monarchy. And as Thomas Dagla tells us, protesters there are demanding more than just words.
Saluting cadets in Jamaica, a prince who may never become their king. This one-time British colony, now the latest to envision a future without the monarchy. From meeting hospital staff to greeting adoring fans, William and Kate's Caribbean tour has been filled as ever with curated photo ops. The smiles undercut by generations of anger now boiling over.
We believe it is only reasonable that out of some respect and regard, you issue an apology.
Dining at the Governor General's residence, William didn't deliver that apology for Britain's brutal history in Jamaica, saying instead,
I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
In the sugarcane fields of Jamaica, as in Barbados, Africans were taken against their will to toil in inhumane conditions. Plantations that enriched British elites at the expense of slaves and their descendants.
Institutional racism that is a part of that family's history.
Historian Hilary Beckles is spearheading a Caribbean-wide push for reparations from Britain, tracing the wrongs of the past all the way to King Charles I in the 17th century.
The colonial parliament over which he presided deemed that black people were not human beings, were property, chattel, and ought to be treated as property.
In Canada, too, those with roots in the region are watching, like at this Jamaican restaurant in Toronto. Love for the island can mean fury for its former colonial rulers.
I would be surprised if anyone in the African or even the Caribbean diaspora would receive them with a welcome arms.
The couple's next stop, the Bahamas, where there will be more history to reckon with. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Yukon is in the middle of a deepening health crisis. Opioid abuse is so rampant, the territory has been under a state of emergency since late January. 10 people have died so far this year, and in 2021, it had a per capita death rate of 46.5 per 100,000. That's the highest in Canada. Anna Desmarais spoke to those on the front line.
Happy birthday.
Chantal Tizia wishes her older sister was here to see their little brother Gavin turn 15. In January, Miranda Charlie died of a drug overdose at Whitehorse's emergency shelter.
She kind of brought me up, and being my younger brother, she did a lot for the community.
Last year, Yukon had the highest per capita opioid death rate in the country. And this year, a huge surge. 8 people, including Miranda, died in just the first 3 weeks of the year, a crisis that keeps taking more lives. Heather Jones often comes here alone to pray. She's the territory's chief coroner. 40% of all the deaths she works on now are opioid related. The territory's drug supply, tainted with fentanyl. Some victims, people she knew.
I feel that there's very few of us, if any, that have to reach very far to be personally impacted by these deaths.
Across town, this group of Yukoners is working around the clock. They provide crucial information needed to try to save lives.
I'm getting phone calls and emails all day long, like people wanting resources and support as soon as possible every day.
Alex Hodgins is getting ready to show people outside of Whitehorse how to safely use drugs and how to use naloxone kits to revive someone who's overdosed. But he can't keep up with the demand.
You know, it would be really great if there would be more, if our organization could expand, if there could be more people like myself on the ground.
The territorial government and First Nations have been taking steps to solve the drug crisis, including opening up a supervised consumption site here in the capital. But frontline workers say a safe drug supply is what's needed most. And they say the only way to do that is to decriminalize hard drugs. Anna Desmarais, CBC News, Whitehorse.
BC students will be learning more about Indigenous culture and history next year, why all students will be enrolling in these new graduation requirements beginning in 2023.
Small shareholders tackled Canada's biggest bank today. Their targets, the Royal Bank's top officers, what they make and how they operate. Ian Hannamansing now on an early skirmish in what may be a long fight.
How do we get to the convention center? Through here or?
Yeah, just right. In this David and Goliath battle, there are actually 2 Davids, Bob Verdun and Yves Michaud. Michaud went to court in Quebec to force the Royal and National banks to let him put some contentious issues to a shareholder vote.
Hi, I'm Bob Verdun and I'm representing Yves Michaud.
And today, Verdun came to the Royal Bank's annual meeting in Vancouver to ask shareholders to dramatically reduce the president's salary and split his job in half.
I'm John Cleghorn.
John Cleghorn is both president and chairman of the board. Last year, he made $2.5 million. Too much power, says Verdun, and too much money.
High salaries and bonuses for CEOs in banks are uncalled for because the banks do not recruit their senior talent from outside. They rise from within.
This business professor who studies executive compensation says bank president salaries are too high, especially when compared to their employees' wages.
We found that maybe a 20-to-1 ratio
between the average bank employee or average employee in any company and the CEO salary is reasonable.
According to Verdun, that would bring Cleghorn's salary to about $800,000. But with bank profits and share prices soaring, shareholders didn't care much for Verdun's motions. On cutting the president's salary, just 5% sided with him, 89.2% voted against him. And on splitting the top job, another loss, though this time 17% agreed with Verdun, while 78% voted for the status quo. The bank's reaction to the 17% who voted to split the job?
I think that what we have here today in those proposals reflects a lack of understanding of really how boards work.
And what about the $2.5 million a year?
Everybody in our organization is paid based on market. And that's a basic statement for everybody. We have to benchmark ourselves against our competitors and similar companies.
Oh, I'm thrilled.
Verdun says now that these issues are on the agenda, there will be more banks, more shareholder meetings, and many more chances to continue his battle. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Still in British Columbia, social workers were out protesting today. They argue that children are at risk because the social workers' caseloads are too high, and they want the province to come up with a better plan. There were rallies in several cities.
Representatives from the Assembly of First Nations are preparing to meet the Pope. Northwest Territories Regional Chief Gerald Antoine says the leaders will urge the church to accept responsibility for its role in the residential school system.
We have reiterated to the church that they must be accountable and acknowledge their responsibility for the great harm caused by their direct role in the institution of assimilation and genocide that they ran.
Antoine will lead the delegation to the Vatican. An estimated 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend residential schools over a century, and many of them were abused. Well, changes coming to the way Indigenous courses are taught in high school in BC. Up until now, a fraction of students typically signed up to take the classes focused on Indigenous culture, literature, and history. But starting in September of next year, it's 2023, the Education Ministry is making it mandatory for students to enroll in one in order to graduate. The classes already exist, so it's only the requirement that's changing. An Indigenous educator says this is an important step. Let's bring in a former teacher who now advises the province on First Nations education. Jo Corona, thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
Jo, we know this is such an important change, but can you talk about what effect it will have, making sure students actually learn this coursework?
Wow, where to begin? It's been a long time coming, as many folks have talked about. This is a long overdue change in our education system. And what we know is that what happens in our system has a great effect on society. And when we think about the opportunity for all learners in BC schools to develop their understanding, to broaden their knowledge of Indigenous peoples, cultures, histories, and communities, the diverse Indigenous peoples across this country, then we can really think about and get an understanding of how that can impact our society at large, and thinking about how this work is connected to anti-racism, to Indigenous specific anti-racism work. Just gets a lot of folks really excited right now.
Yeah, and we know that fewer than 5% of students were opting to take courses like this. So is this enough? I mean, I know it's a jump from even when I was young. I can't remember learning much at all about Indigenous history. We know it's happening more now, but does it need to go even further?
I think this is a good first step. And we'll see from there. You know, we want to build up something that's robust and that's effective. And recognizing too that this requirement that's coming in is really broad in scope, so that learners in K-12 before they graduate are not only going to understand the fuller scope of history of Canada and Indigenous peoples, but also learn so much more about Indigenous peoples, about Indigenous cultures in this country, about communities, about peoples. When we look at the variety of course options that are available to Indigenous specific courses, we can see, students being able to take the Indigenous focused courses in areas that might resonate for them. And what happens next? We'll find out.
Jo Crona is a former teacher who is now working with the province on Indigenous education in our classrooms. Thank you. Maybe. Meet the Haida rap duo dubbed the Cool Ladies. How this elder with the Haida Eagle clan connected with the younger rapper, coming up. And tonight you are looking at a live shot of the North Shore Mountains at 6:40 on this Thursday evening. The wet weather returns. Can we call it Marchuary? Amy Bell is back with the full weather forecast.
Are you ready, kids?
Aye, aye, Captain!
I can't hear you!
Aye, aye, Captain!
Oh! Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
My name is Weston Sutherland. I'm originally from the Peguis First Nation in Manitoba, but I was basically born and raised in Winnipeg. I became interested in language when I was in high school. I really wanted to connect closer with my language and my people and my culture, of course. And I just found that speaking Ojibwe is just so inspiring and just so fulfilling. Kind of what inspired me to pursue what I'm doing is with Ojibwe and many other Indigenous languages, there really wasn't any resources or just entertainment available. I found it very cool how people could just take their own voice and put it onto like a cartoon per se. So, I thought I could do the same with Ojibwe, There are many elders, and I would say people above the age of 40 that still fluently speak the language. However, I can't really name any youth, which, I'd love to change that one day, with myself. I've learned a lot of the language, doing what I do and pursuing this kind of project. And I really hope that, other youth, can learn from it, maybe do something similar, and hopefully they can also pick up the language like I did. Taka. I chose cartoons because growing up, I found that, cartoons are like the funnest way to, learn a language. If I had this, Ojibwe as a child, maybe I could have learned the language fluently. So kind of what I'm hoping for is, I want to do the same for the youth of today with cartoons in Ojibwe. A goal for the future is I want one day for there to be official Ojibwe dubs and other Indigenous languages as well. I've made so many friends doing this project, and many of them who are young adults. They tell me that they're learning so much from my videos, and they tell me they have their young children listening to my videos, and I just think that's so cool because that's pretty much what I hoped for. A lot of my elders that speak the language, they really appreciate what I'm doing, and they love hearing their language on the big screen. I've definitely got some people from other Indigenous tribes and languages, asking me for help and how to teach them how they can do the same thing as what I'm doing for Ojibwe. I really hope that one day in the future there are many cartoons and videos available in all these Indigenous languages across Canada and the United States. Anin siagin mawin kigan en tanishna bem ke yin tapskunin midwech.
A musical duo on Haida Gwaii is gaining fans in BC. The pair uses their songs to share an endangered Indigenous language. The duo tells CBC they teamed up in December and so far have 3 songs together, 2 of which are raps. 84-year-old Gladys Vandal, whose Haida name is Jiksa, is an elder of the Haida Eagle clan. And 25-year-old Julia Weeder is of Greek and Croatian ancestry and grew up on Haida Gwaii. They post their songs on YouTube with subtitles in the Skidegit dialect of the Haida Gwaii language and their English translation. For their lyrics, they use, in part, words being taught at the local Haida immersion program. Both say teaching and learning the Haida language is vital in healing the intergenerational trauma that First Nations have experienced. And putting the rap songs online makes it easy and accessible to all. According to the Haida Nation Council, the language has only 24 fluent speakers left. Well, a memorial of sorts has popped up around BC. On benches and porta potties, someone is marking the memory of a person with the last name Shit, as in the creek, and the first name Jack.
In loving memory of Jack Shit, he was an he was an A word, but he was a funny A word.
It's kind of funny, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he lived the way he was named.
From Stanley Park to Lillooet, Vernon, and Victoria, the plaques have been spotted throughout the province over the past 2 months. The crude tagline is accompanied by a QR code that links to a Facebook page showing all the locations the plaques have been placed. A post explains the purpose of the project, saying Jack is dearly loved and is missed by all. He lived his life fully and made his life and now his legacy to make people laugh. He believed that if we all took ourselves less seriously, we could all live a happier life. Now, it doesn't seem these tributes are official. The City of Victoria has already dispatched crews to remove them. The BC Coroner Service says they have no record of any investigation into the death of someone with Mr. Shit's name, but regardless, his memory lives on. I like to think that it is in tribute to someone named Jack. Maybe he didn't have that last name, but he was a funny guy.
I think the joke, that's Jack's lasting legacy. It's certainly a memory, or it's a mystery to solve, though. I like it.
Absolutely. All right, and turning to weather in all of these beautiful places with all of those plaques.
I know, yes. Some of those plaques going to get a little wet over the next couple of days, but we did have dry weather and gorgeous weather in a lot of areas today, right across the province. And it's not a washout by any means for tomorrow or even for the entire weekend. Tomorrow is definitely the transition day, so we've seen the system just sitting off the coast, making its way towards us quite quickly. So we will see that hitting areas of the north and the north coast tomorrow. Vancouver Island as well. You'll start to see some shower activity in the morning. But yes, as it makes its way further inland, we will see some snow falling in areas of the interior. Rain for us here on the south coast and actually staying fairly dry as you make your way into the Kootenay. So you'll be lucky there, but you'll get it eventually. Keep in mind, though, end of spring break means a lot of people will be traveling this weekend, and that means it will be a little dicey for some of those mountain passes. So do make sure you've got the correct tires and you're ready for any conditions. For tomorrow, though, as I mentioned, wet into Fino and Comox, Nanaimo, but that's really for the northern half of Vancouver Island. Down south, you're still looking at nice weather. A mix of sun and cloud with a chance of showers for Whistler, mainly cloudy for the Fraser Valley, but it will stay dry. What I'm talking about is this unsettled weather along Prince Rupert, Port Hardy. You do have a chance of showers, but you'll also see some sunshine earlier in the day. Prince George, Williams Lake, all the same. But as I mentioned, as you make your way, say, through Cranbrook, Kelowna, Nelson, you'll all be looking at sunshine for at least another day. Our 5-day forecast, not too bad, but definitely not the best timing. So we'll still see a few hints of blue sky tomorrow with that cloud rapidly taking over. We'll see rain arriving overnight early Saturday morning, and Saturday will be the wet one, so we'll see winds a little bit gusty near the water at times, and just a temperature of around 11, staying mild overnight. So that's how you know we're making this transition into better weather. So 8 degrees for the overnight, not too bad. Sunday tapering off to showers that they'll mainly be to start off. By the end of the day, we may even see some drier areas and then catch a few breaks of blue sky. Monday, Everybody's back to school, back to work. We're going to have a gorgeous day, sunshine and a high of 12. Tuesday, though, we get back into showers. So it is March. It's in Vancouver. This is what we're going to see for the next several weeks. In fact, is that mix of sun with some clouds and then some rain on and off sort of days at a time. So I would just make sure you've got the umbrella handy no matter what you're doing.
It's always handy in this town, eh?
It is.
Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
Well, in Montreal, a group of students are being taught how to make moccasins as a way to learn about the residential school system and all that was lost. As Simon Nakonechny explains, it's part of their school's effort to promote reconciliation.
Small moccasins for small feet, a symbol of Indigenous children who were sent to residential schools across Canada and never returned home.
Some of them weren't able to see their families or ever again, and nobody ever knew what happened to their kids.
It's just not right to take kids away from their families and from their culture.
Rebecca Elkerton is Anishinaabe from the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation near London, Ontario. Her grandparents went to residential schools and her father was a victim of the 60s scoop.
The point for me, I think, is to heal together through creation and find a common ground, and that's what we're doing when we're working on things together.
The inspiration for this activity came from Jessica Hernandez, who owns a bead shop in the Ganigahaga community of Ganawage. She visited the school in the fall to talk about her project to collect 215 pairs of beaded moccasins, one for every unmarked grave found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School last year.
Burling Academy really did their due diligence in wanting to reconcile and teach properly about what's going on.
Actually, I came to Canada. I'm from Mexico, so I had no idea about the history.
I know we cannot go back in the past and change what has been done, but I just hope that people will recognize that it was wrong.
I think when you do something like this, it creates a moment in time that you carry with you forever, and you start to reflect more on that deeper conversation. And I think as they get older, they'll reflect on it differently, and they'll have new conversations.
When finished, the moccasins will be given to Hernandez, who will add them to those she's already received. But for the kids making them, the hope is that this will be one more step in a longer process of learning and reconciliation. Simon Nakonechny, CBC News, Montreal.
A familiar furry face returns to a popular ski slope. We'll tell you where coming up.
It's our first assembly in 2 years. It was amazing. The energy from the crowd, you could see they were excited to be all together in one space.
Your first assembly in 2 years, so some of the kids that were in there today, they would not have been to an assembly at St. John High before?
Nope, that was our first. They've heard about it from the grade 11s and 12s, but they would have never seen a full assembly before. Nothing to that extent. We've raised over $4,600, and that's as of this morning before the assembly started. There are still some funds that are coming in, and I've been assured that by the end of the day today, no matter what, by hook or by crook, there will be $5,000 to donated to the Red Cross.
Awesome. So what's next for the money? Where's it going to go?
Going to go to the Red Cross Ukraine humanitarian crisis, and then of course with the donations that's being doubled as long as it hasn't hit the cap. So that's our $5,000 will hopefully be used for good, and then the hair is going to be donated to the BC Children's Hospital for the donation of creating a wig with it. At 4:30 today, we have I do have an appointment booked to try to clean this up. Maybe a little less mullet-like, maybe a little bit more of a conservative haircut. We'll see. I'm not sure if he can work his magic, but we will see.
This whole experience for me was very overwhelming, but in a positive way, and it was almost like a really changing experience, seeing how a little idea became such an impact on a community so small to, almost a whole country that we're trying to help out. It's really crazy to me. I'm almost speechless.
I hope that basically from this whole thing that, you know, there's been some awareness raised, that they want to go out and they want to fundraise, they want to try to change the world, do something good. That sometimes just sitting idly by is something that they don't have to do. You know, it's going to be an interesting look for a little while, but yeah, I'm still kind of excited about this.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Stream your favorite CBC dramas or comedies 24/7 on demand on the CBC Gem app. Plus, you can live stream CBC Vancouver News. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
During the winter, the lights at a greenhouse in Prince Edward Island are giving agricultural researchers the opportunity to conduct their work year-round. As Nancy Russell tells us, the facility uses automated lighting and drip irrigation systems to trick crops into thinking it's early summer.
Research biologist Dan McEachern takes a closer look at his spring barley planted in the greenhouse in mid-September. It will be used for breeding barley varieties suited for growing conditions in Atlantic Canada. Work that will have faster results thanks to the bright lights here in the Harrington greenhouse.
We're essentially trying to replicate mid-summer conditions just to get as much growth as we can.
When the seed heads are ready, it's meticulous work creating the new plants.
We choose a plant that we're going to have as the male and a plant as the female, and then we get the cross. So we take plants with desirable traits that we're looking for, and then hopefully the babies will turn out to be a great new variety.
McEachern says they are aiming for varieties with higher yield, more resistant to disease, and in recent years, they are also breeding for malting characteristics for the craft brewing industry.
Using the greenhouse essentially gives us an extra year, so we can shave a year off of the whole production cycle of developing a variety by having a greenhouse like this.
The greenhouse is also important to the work of this weed scientist. Andrew Mackenzie Gopsel takes soil cores from fields in the summer and then concentrates them down to the weed seeds. They are then grown in trays for more than a year and a half here in the greenhouse.
There's only so much we can do out in the field. This really extends the amount of time that we can do research throughout the year.
The lights are on a timer, and the drip irrigation systems in the greenhouse mean researchers don't have to worry about their plants drying out on weekends or holidays.
Yeah, some of my colleagues at other centers don't have access to the same type of facilities that we do, so that really gives us quite an advantage there.
The scientists say there is another benefit. They say being in the greenhouse is the next best thing to being out in the field until spring arrives and a new season of outdoor research. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Harrington.
Well, there's a sure sign of spring at a ski resort just outside Golden. A local and very popular resident is back on the hill. Boo the bear slowly pulled himself out of the den earlier this week. It's the 20th time his springtime debut has been captured at the Kicking Horse Mountain Resort. Staff are asking all guests to be quiet when riding the gondola over Boo's enclosure and when skiing nearby. Based on his size, it's probably a good idea to let him wake up as slowly and as calmly as he wants to. I just love it when we get footage like that. Amazing stuff, and hopefully we continue to see you, Boo, every year. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. We will see you back here tomorrow, and Dan is here at 11 tonight. Good night.